Hey everyone, if you're just joining us, we're going to be starting in a few minutes, so hang tight. Thank you. We'll just let some more people join. Hey everyone, thanks for joining. We're just going to let a few more people funnel in, and we'll get started at about 2 minutes after the hour. Thanks very much. All right, I think we're good to go. Hi everyone, this is Josh Valentine. I'm the Communications Director with the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project. And welcome to our webinar on energy equity, bringing the benefits of our fight against climate change to frontline communities. This is a major focus for SWEEP, and we hope you enjoy it. We've got Representative Kristina Ortez from New Mexico and our New Mexico Representative Tammy Fiebelkorn on the line, and they will be presenting. Just a couple of things before we get started. If you have a question, we'll try to get to it at the end of the presentation. We'll have a Q&A session, so just enter that question into the Zoom Q&A box. The recording of today's webinar is going to be sent out to all registrants, and that will be sent by Monday, so likely tomorrow. And please share it with anyone you think might be interested in this very important topic. Also, we have a couple of upcoming webinars that'll be most likely starting up again in September. So check our website, swenergy.org, for more information on that in the coming weeks. And I'm going to get it right off to Tammy, and she's going to start. So thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks, Josh. Hi, everybody. Like Josh said, I'm Tammy Fiebelkorn. I am privileged to be the New Mexico representative for Southwest Energy Efficiency Project and have been for many years. And I'm really proud of the work that we do in New Mexico and in the region on this issue. It's really an important one. And before I jump into what energy equity is, I do want to fully introduce my co-presenter today, Representative Kristina Ortez. She is representative for District 42 here in northern New Mexico. She's starting her second term soon, and I will tell you that the first 2 years of her service to the state of New Mexico has been astounding. She has been a true champion on all things energy and energy efficiency, but particularly on services and programs to help our low income and frontline communities. And I'm just privileged to have her here with me today. So thank you for being here, Representative Ortez.
Thank you, Tammy. Glad to be here, everyone.
So I just wanted to start with kind of a big picture of what energy equity is. And this is from the Pacific Northwest National Labs, and it's a really smart, thought out definition. It really takes into effect that we have disadvantaged communities that have been historically marginalized. And when we look at those communities, we have to think of how to get energy services to them in a fair and equitable way. It has to make sure that they have the benefits of all the things that we all have the benefit of when we're talking about fighting climate change, having energy services that are fair and reasonable for everyone. But this is really more how I think of energy equity. I believe that everyone deserves a home that is safe, that's comfortable, that you can actually maintain a temperature in, that's functional, that you're not sick in, it's healthy, that it's affordable to operate. And we're going to talk about the affordability a lot here today, that it doesn't damage the environment and it doesn't negatively impact future generations. And so that's the goal for me. When we talk about equitable energy systems, energy equity, we really are trying to think of a way to provide a home to every single person that has all of these characteristics. And to me, that's really important. And it's really interesting because we have so many people that are in different places on that scale, on that checklist of items. So that's how we think of energy equity here in New Mexico when we're working on policies and programs. And I think it's really important to remember that I'm sure everybody's seen this graphic 1,000 times about you can't just give the same thing to everyone because that doesn't get us to the end result. Remember, the end result we want to get to is that home that's good for everyone, that's not negatively impacting future generations, that's not negatively impacting the environment. And so you can't just give the same thing to everyone and get that way. One size fit all is not an approach that we want to see taken. And I'll just give one example with heat pumps, right? We all love heat pumps. They're our new favorite thing. Representative Ortez and I talk about them daily in New Mexico. But we can't just go out and give a heat pump to everyone. We still have homes in New Mexico that don't have electricity. So a heat pump's not going to do them a lot of good. We have homes that are such poor housing stock that if you put a heat pump in, you still wouldn't be able to maintain a temperature that keeps people in that home safe and healthy. And so really energy equity is about looking at each individual and providing what that individual needs to get us to the point of energy equity. And we just, I want to talk about not leaving anyone behind. I think everyone's probably seen this production adoption code or curve many, many times. And I'm an economist. I learned this in college and I really lived by it for a really long time, that we need to get people to be innovators and early adopters, and then you'll get the majority of people. And then you have those laggards that you don't worry about, right? But I would challenge us all to start rethinking this curve, because I'm not convinced anymore that those are laggards. They're just people that might not have access to energy efficiency, to renewable energy, to any of the things that we're talking about. And so I now think of this curve as completely out of date. We need to make sure that we're bringing the benefits to those folks at the tail end of this curve, because without them, we're really not doing a great job on energy equity. So that's just the challenge of the day, is to rethink the curve, rethink our outreach, particularly to frontline communities and low-income individuals. So there's a lot of kinds of products that we often consider when we're talking about these programs. Here in New Mexico, Representative Ortez and I, as I've already mentioned, we really are pushing heat pump water heaters. There's also solar, and that can be, I want to make sure that everyone has access to solar, but that can be a lot of different things. That can be utility scale solar, it could be community solar, it could be distributed generation solar on your house. But whatever that looks like, we want to make sure everyone has equal access. And then kind of the basics that we all think are basics, but there are many people in our community that don't have access to better insulation, better windows, better doors, even efficient electronics. And so when you're thinking about policies and programs, you want to think big, include as many things as you can. And then we have a lot of barriers, and this has been something that Representative Ortez has really been focused on here in New Mexico, and it's really important to keep these in mind as you're designing policies and programs.
Yeah, I'd like to give an example here of what happened in northern New Mexico, and I'm not sure if folks who are watching are from urban areas or from rural areas, but up here in northern New Mexico, it's mostly rural. And in December of 2021, we had a freak storm called a snow squall with major winds and dumping of snow all over the rural part of our state. Folks lost electricity for about 2 weeks in some cases, 3 weeks in others. And folks were really concerned about how they would keep themselves warm. Gas lines were interrupted. And one of the effects of this was the state legislature and our governor putting funding into gas lines so that folks can have access to gas heat in these mountainous areas. So that was a case in which we talk a lot about electrification. I'm absolutely in favor of that. But when folks lose electricity and don't trust the system, they demand some kind of energy redundancy, I think. So, I think we have a lot of work to do in rural areas, especially around how folks have traditionally heated their homes, how folks have traditionally cooked, and when we think about what the future holds with climate change and some of the challenges of distribution, and I think we need to be thinking about that as well. How we can create policies and programs that support traditional uses, especially up here in our forested areas of firewood, with also the concern that electricity might not be reliable. Tammy, you can jump in and fight me on this.
I completely agree. I will just add that, in addition to the kinds of issues that the representative was mentioning, we do have additional barriers to getting programs and policies to individuals. And we see this in rural areas, in urban areas, everywhere we're trying to do this work. And the number one issue is trust. When you are dealing with folks that have been disadvantaged, that they're in frontline communities, they haven't had a history of positive interactions with authority, then it's hard to get them to trust the utility or the government when they come knocking on the door to say, hey, we want to give you things, right? And one of the problems that we have, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, is that a lot of times when we design these policies and programs, we make it where you have to fill out a bunch of forms and tell your entire life story to get the help. And that does not create trust. It does not build trust. It, in fact, does the exact opposite and really disincentivizes people from participating. So all of these things.
But there are ways around it. We know.
Yes. Yeah. And we've got a couple of examples that we'll talk to you about, but just know that that is a serious stumbling block, along with all these other things that are listed here. So, Representative Ortez mentioned it, but, in New Mexico, but I'm sure in other states too, there is absolutely no way that we are going to reach our climate goals if we don't include frontline communities in our plans. So we have to make sure that we are bringing the benefits of electrification, of energy efficiency, of renewable energy to everybody in our community. We cannot just choose those early adopters from that product adoption curve that we were talking about. We can't just go with them and say we're good. We literally won't make the numbers that we have to make to do something about the really scary future that we can have if we don't do something about climate change. For example, in New Mexico, we have a higher percentage of people living in poverty than some of the states around us, but I think everyone has, in our region at least, has pretty substantial poverty rates. In New Mexico, we have about 2 million people. 20% of those folks are living at poverty line. They're living in poverty. And those folks that are living in poverty have an average energy burden of 14%. Now, let me just put that in perspective. And I know the representative and I talk about this a lot. My energy burden at my home, what I spend of my total pay, my income, what I spend on my energy bills is between 1% and 2%.
And that's lower than the national average for non-low income folks, which is around 3%. Nationally, low income folks pay 8% or so of their energy burden. That's their energy burden. So in New Mexico, it's almost double the national average. And that's for a state with abundant opportunities for renewables, and as an energy producing state, it's pretty gross. That's my technical term for how I feel about it. No, but it's unconscionable, and it's something that I think that we can make some strides for policy wise.
I agree. And I think the first thing that I would recommend, and this has been incredibly helpful in our work here in New Mexico, is figure out what your energy burdens are statewide. This is a map of New Mexico with energy burdens by county. And the purple, the darker the purple, the higher the energy burden. And if you look, there's only one county in New Mexico that doesn't have excessive energy burden, and excessive is defined as 5% or more. So that one county, and if you've been to New Mexico or you know New Mexico, you'll know that is Los Alamos County, where the labs are, where the atomic bomb was created. Those folks have, that's not a frontline community, but every other county in our state has excessive energy burden. And so it's just really important to have that information. This map was incredibly helpful when I go to the legislature to say, please pass this bill about low income assistance. It's pretty telling that that's what our state looks like. And you can drill down. Now, we were lucky, we got funded from the Turner Foundation to do this statewide energy burden map. It's done by GreenLink. They could do it for other states if you need it. And you can get a little funding for it, but it's incredible. It's just a useful tool. I can't stress how important it is to get that baseline, because before I had this, I would go to legislators, and legislators like Representative Ortez say, yes, I understand this issue, but many just never quite got it until they saw the map and went, oh, we have a problem. So that's the first step in figuring out your next steps, is you've got to understand where you are on these energy burdens.
Tammy, can I interrupt you for a second? Everyone, if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A box on your Zoom control panel. And we'll get to the questions at the end of the presentation. Thanks.
Thanks, Josh. So just quickly, like other states, there are states that are spending a lot of money on energy efficiency in particular. There are states that spend 10 times what New Mexico spends, and you can just look at this list down here. And I think that this is really helpful to ask legislators, ask elected officials to please improve your state's provisions. Unless you're Montana, I think there's a lot of justification for every single state in our region to be doing more and doing better. And so we use this graph a lot to just, again, set that baseline of, we have this huge energy burden problem. We have to meet our climate goals. And here's how we compare to other states. And it's not good.
And I would add that, if for any of the viewers who are in New Mexico, now is the time to put pressure on your state legislators around this, this kind of spending. This is the time when we make the budget. And we'll be working on that budget for the next couple of months. And, as there's no way we're going to increase these numbers and increase this investment unless we get it into the budget in the next couple of months. So do your work, and we will be listening.
So I know this sounds really completely obvious, but there's really just two kinds of policies and program solutions that we need. And we need both. We need to be able to reduce energy costs, and we need to be able to reduce the energy use for frontline low-income communities. And so we just wanted to walk you through a couple of the examples of these kinds of policies and programs that we've done here in New Mexico, talk about what we would have liked to have done more, lessons learned on each of these, and hopefully we'll give you some ideas for your area as well. The first concept is that, most of our states in our region have a energy efficiency resource standard. And in New Mexico, the utility energy efficiency programs have a required set aside for low income programs. So there's a special low income energy efficiency program, and it does all of the things that we want those low income programs to do. What's really important is that it's designed specifically for the low income community, and it's 100% of the costs of whatever that is, right? So if there's in the low income program, there could be insulation or better lighting, but for low income and frontline communities, it's really important that they be 100% funded, right? So that's a really nice thing. And again, in New Mexico and in Nevada, there's a 5% set aside for whatever the utility is spending on their required energy efficiency programs. 5% of that budget at least has to be spent on low income specifically for low income program residents. And it's been really effective in New Mexico. Nevada's just taken place a couple of, I don't remember what year, but it seems to be going well there too. Some of our utilities have really jumped on this and have gone way above the 5% requirement. They're spending, at one point, one of our utilities was spending close to 40% of their budget on low income programs. So it really can jumpstart and really get needed services directly to folks. Now, in New Mexico, we have a lot of rural electric co-ops that are not included in the energy efficiency resource standard. So if you're lucky enough to live in an IOU territory in New Mexico, you have this benefit, right? But if you live, for example, where Representative Ortez does, these are not available to you. But still an important step if you're looking at your state and thinking of things that you can do to really increase energy equity. The second program that we wanted to talk about, and this one is just, it's going really, really well here in Albuquerque. It's called the Community Energy Efficiency Project. And this is a program where local partners go into homes and do energy efficiency and electrification upgrades for free. in frontline disadvantaged communities. And it's been amazing to watch. And the way it works, and the reason that it's only in Albuquerque right now, is that we use this capital stacking model. We start at the bottom. There's local resources. In Albuquerque, the fire department has kind of a handyman on service or on call. And so does the senior affairs department. So if we go into a home and they need things like, basic insulation, maybe a better ramp for a handicapped person to use, those kind of things are done with those local resources that's completely free. Then we take advantage of any utility energy efficiency programs that are available. And again, those are free for low-income people. So we do all we can within those programs. There's still stuff left over to do. We go to the state weatherization program and we utilize all of their resources, which are also free. These are the state weatherization money that most states get from the federal government. And we do as much as we possibly can with that. Then what's left over is when we use the Community Energy Efficiency Project funds. And that is $100,000 that we set aside last year in the city of Albuquerque budget to provide that like what's left over, right? So we'll go into a home, and perfect example is we went into a multifamily unit in the International District here in Albuquerque with extremely low income residents. And we went into each unit, and each unit needs something different, but they got all kinds of weatherization. They got new windows, they got new doors, they got better lighting, all of those things paid for by the utility and the weatherization funds. And then we use the C project funds to pay for a heat pump and a heat pump water heater, right? So those C project funds, $100,000 doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're only using them for those additional measures, you can stretch it pretty far. And we're going to try to get this program refunded next year for $150,000. So we can do even more homes in Albuquerque. And we're also trying really hard to market this to other cities, because I think this is a really good model that gets direct benefits to the folks that need it the most. And we took that model and we created a statewide program, the Community Energy Efficiency Development Block Grants, or SEED. And it was modeled after that Community Energy Efficiency Project. This is a really cool program that Representative Ortez was our sponsor for. We tried 3 times and we finally got it passed earlier this year. And it sets up a fund at our Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department to give out grants, basically, to local governments for block grant activities for low-income areas. So say your city wants to apply, you have to work with a local community partner so that we have that trust that we were talking about earlier. It's not me, it's not the government knocking on doors, it's the community partner that's been working with them all along. One of the projects that we're developing here in Albuquerque, it's a immigration group that's already been working with folks on the ground on a variety of immigration issues. They already have the trust. So when they go to the door and say, would you like to participate in this program? Well, first of all, they open the door. And secondly, there is that trust that allows us to get them into the program. And so you just apply for these grants. They're going to be on a first come, first serve basis, basically, as long as you fit all the requirements. And back to that budget discussion that we were having, we were lucky to get 10 million in this fund to start the program. Now, that is certainly not enough to serve everyone in New Mexico. Short math is that given those poverty numbers that you heard a while ago, if we were to serve everyone who needs energy efficiency and electrification upgrades in New Mexico, who is also low income, we would need 500 million. So this is really, at this point, 10 million is like a pilot, but it's still going to make an amazing difference for a lot of people. And we're very, very proud of it. I know the representative has worked super hard on this one, so I'm going to let her tell you more about it.
Yeah, I was I'm still kind of dumbfounded by how challenging it was to get this started. We have weatherization programs at, existing state agencies, the Mortgage Finance Authority. So I think that there was already, some acceptance and philosophical acceptance around this, but there was great challenge in getting this program started. 3 tries, third time was the charm, and what I'm hoping is that as we develop the rules for this program, we really we can make sure that, especially rural communities can take advantage of this, and we can show some real success, especially as we work with our counties and our cities and colonias, which are small communities, to be able to piggyback some of this funding with other state and federal funding coming our way, from the infrastructure funds. But I'm really proud of this. I think, Tammy, you really touched on it, how because we require a community partner to work with, to work on this and to really apply for those funds with the political subdivision or municipality or county. I think that makes it easier for a program to be successful if folks are working with people that they know. So I'm glad and grateful that C has been so successful and that we can try it on a larger scale. But as Tammy mentioned, we need a lot more money to make this go along. So we'll be working on this in the budget again to make sure that there's more, hopefully more money in next year's budget for this hopefully successful program. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, thank you, Representative. It was a game changer for the state of New Mexico, so we're really excited. I just wanted to give a little bit more background on the kinds of projects that can be done with this money. Back to the earlier discussion of what is energy equity, and you can't just give everybody the same thing. This really is modeled around your local government will go out and figure out from a map of energy burdens or however they want to identify their most disadvantaged community. Maybe it's a block, maybe it's 4 blocks. And then look at those homes and see what those homes need to get to that goal that we said. We want a home that's safe and affordable and all of those things. And so in one community, this money could be used to buy new refrigerators for everyone on a 12-block area, because everyone in that area has, refrigerators from 1970s. In another community, it could be, wow, we have this multi-family unit that is extremely low income, and it's impossible to keep the people in those units comfortable and healthy because it's so drafty. And so we could really weatherize, improve the building shell for the entire multifamily unit. And in another community, it might be, we have 4 homes that need complete from the ground up weatherization. They need better insulation, they need windows, need doors, they need heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, the whole gamut. And so it really is up to that local community to decide what they need and then put that into a proposal for a grant from Energy and Minerals. So we hope that we've hit the right balance of looking at individuals and giving individuals what they need to get to an equitable energy situation for themselves. And I'm so proud of this bill. This is one of the graphics that we used on social media when we were trying to get this bill passed. And it really resonated with folks that it's about local jobs, because obviously if we're going into homes and doing all these retrofits, those are local jobs. They can't be outsourced, right? No one can put in insulation or a heat pump from afar. It's going to get affordable utility bills for everybody that we help. It's going to get more energy efficient homes, which makes everybody healthier and safer and makes it comfortable to live there. And then of course it helps us with our climate action. And in New Mexico, we had this, and I've been doing this for a very, very, very long time. This was the largest coalition of supporters of any policy I've ever worked on. We had environmental advocates, we had low income advocates, consumer advocates, energy efficiency businesses, like the actual businesses that are going to be going out and doing this work, faith-based organizations, public health advocates. And then we had support from utilities and legislators. Local governments showed up to speak in favor of this. Public regulation commissioners. That one was a hard sell, but we finally ended up with public regulation commissioners supporting us. And then we are lucky in New Mexico. We had our U.S. Senator Martin Heinrich and our U.S. Representative Melanie Stansberry, who were both incredibly supportive of this bill. And in fact, Representative Stansberry, when she was a state representative, was a co-sponsor of one of the failed attempts. So we have a lot of
both of the failed attempts.
So we had a lot of support, and I throw this up here not to brag, although I'm very proud of it. It's just that when you're doing something like this, if you're proposing some kind of policy like this, it's kind of a big picture thing. It's really important that you not just rely on your traditional allies. If it's just enviros that are going around selling this, it's a really uphill battle. But if you have that wide coalition, that makes legislators listen. So
it really does. It really does. I heard stories about nuns calling legislators, and that made such a huge difference. Sorry, I just took a sip of water. I'm really proud to have sponsored this bill and to have met so many of the advocates. And, it really takes so many folks to pass a bill. This was one of the few environmental bills passed in New Mexico in 2022. We'll have our next session in 2023 in January to March. And it makes me a little sad that this was really the only one. But if it had to be one, I'm really, really grateful that it was this one. This is not just an environmental bill. It's a consumer protection bill as well. It's a bill for all New Mexicans, and so I'm really grateful for it. And it was pretty fun to get phone calls from Senator Heinrich. Like, where are we on the bill? What do I have to do? Who do I have to call? That was pretty fun.
I will also point out the C program that was the model we used as the model for this program. When that kicked off, Senator Heinrich brought the United States Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, to our kickoff and spoke at it and got a lot of media around it. Like, that's the level of support that we enjoy from our senator on these kinds of programs. And it's pretty nice. So a couple of other kinds of programs that I think are worthwhile to think through in terms of energy equity. Community solar programs can be an energy equity tool. You can have a set aside, a percentage of community solar you can do it for low income residents, you can do it for renters, you can do it for nonprofits, you can do it for a combination of those things. In New Mexico, we passed community solar legislation that says that 30% of all the projects that are approved must serve low income and service organizations. So there's a lot of ways to do that, but when you're doing these kind of big picture enviro pieces of legislation, think through the equity part and make sure that there's an equity lens that really makes sure that the benefits get to everybody. Another favorite of mine, some sort of sustainable buildings tax credit is always a really nice thing to have in place. You can do these in a lot of different ways, and we've got some lessons learned here that I'll just go through. You can do a credit or you can do a rebate, and obviously a rebate is the better option. In New Mexico, rebates are really kind of a no-go. We get a big fat stop sign in front of us when we try that, so ours is a credit. But if you have the ability to do a rebate. It's just so much easier. When we do credits, we always try to make them transferable. And this is really important because a lot of the folks that we're talking about here, low income, frontline community members, number one, can't wait until their next tax return to get the benefits of this credit. So transferable credits can be sold right when they're issued. And so that gets the money in folks' pockets immediately. And it also allows them to sell if they don't actually file taxes, right? So if they have an income that's so low that they don't have to file, we don't want them to not be able to benefit. In fact, we want them to be able to benefit more than other folks. We also always try to make our tax credits like this refundable. So if a low-income person takes the tax credit for, say, new insulation, and then they file their tax return, but they don't owe any money, so there's nothing to take off from that, the state just sends them a refund check. And that's really an important thing to think through when you're thinking about equity. And you can double or triple, or I'd like to see quadrupling of low-income residents and affordable housing. So whatever your base sustainable buildings tax credit is, you can make it more if someone is low income or if it's an affordable housing project. Here in New Mexico, this is what we did. We had base credits for things like heat pumps, Energy Star windows and doors, insulation, heat pump water heaters, and EV readiness. And then we doubled them for low income and affordable housing. So that the goal here was to get the entire incremental cost for low income folks to be covered with this tax credit. And it was another one of those bills that you thought would be easy. You think, well, this isn't controversial, but it is. And so just be prepared for that. And again, Representative Ortez was our sponsor on this one.
Yeah, and it was, I learned a lot about sustainable buildings. This was my first 60-day session, which was mostly over Zoom because of COVID. So I had to learn a lot very, very quickly. But what I'll add here, and I think what's different, I mean, this tax credit existed before for new buildings. And so when we updated this tax credit, Tammy worked really, really hard to make sure that existing buildings were included, and this extra, the doubling of the credit for low-income folks. What's also included here is manufactured housing, and that's really, really important for a place like New Mexico, which is very poor. Lots of folks in New Mexico live in manufactured housing, and so we wanted to make sure that credit really reflected the reality of our state. So thanks, Tammy, for making that happen. It was harder than we thought it would be.
Yeah, I remember when my first conversation with Representative Ortez, I hadn't met her in person yet, and I said, would you be willing to sponsor this? And she said, oh yeah, that sounds easy. And I said, oh, it won't be. But she was a champion and she stuck with us, and we got this. And it's really, I think this is groundbreaking. For New Mexico, we've never had any kind of incentive for increasing the efficiency or electrification of existing homes. And so this is really super helpful. Another equity lens on this is that it's available for small commercial businesses too. And so in New Mexico, and I think region wide, we have a lot of just mom and pop stores. And we want to be able to make sure that they also can get these kinds of tax credits and the benefits of these things. So these credits are available across the board. Did want to talk a little bit. I know not every state has anti-donation clause, and those of you that don't, good for you. It is somewhat challenging to work around. In New Mexico, we have a clause in our state constitution that basically says that the state government cannot give money directly to people or businesses without something in return, which pretty much says that we can't help people with energy efficiency, renewable energy, electrification. Thankfully, there's an affordable housing exemption, and that's what we used for the SEED program to say it's not affordable housing unless you can afford to live there and pay the utility bills. And so we were able to come up with a very elegant solution, thanks to the UNM Law Clinic, to make sure that this program fits under the affordable housing exemption. The state weatherization program and SEED both use that exemption. And then really exciting news for us is that we also passed an essential household services exemption that will be going to the voters in November. This, because it's a state constitution change, has to be passed by the legislature and then also voted on by the people. And if that passes, then it will be easier in the future to provide these kind of direct services to low-income frontline communities. So fingers crossed on that. I know Representative Ortez and the sponsors of the bill are all working really hard to make sure that we get the benefits of this out to folks in a way that's understandable, because it's
Right.
not super clear when you say essential household services. But what this would allow is that we have a lot of places in New Mexico that do not have electricity. So we could provide
and water.
Yeah, electricity service. We would provide water service, broadband service, but also in the definition it says infrastructure, and the definition of infrastructure in this is technically also energy efficiency, renewable energy, and electrification. So that ballot initiative is going to be very, very important for us. And we're calling it the Connect New Mexico is the phrase for the ballot initiative.
I just want to add here, this is, not only, this has really been the most challenging issue we faced in getting services to low-income folks all around the state. There's no question. It also has an impact at the local level. Lots of municipalities and counties use this as an excuse to not work on these issues, that they can't help people because of anti-donation clause. Well, it's a little bit ridiculous, but I think with this new ballot initiative, we'll be able to really, define how we can use state funds to help. And we have considerable state funds, especially right now, both from, ARPA funds that are coming in, but we have a surplus from, our oil and gas revenues. And this is the time right now, likely at peak oil, that we make these kinds of investments. So we have to really, I think, reduce the barriers in every way to make sure that we can get funding out to the communities that need it most.
So we also talked about, so those were all ways to reduce energy use, and you have to do those, right? But we also need to think about rates in terms of energy equity. You have to at least consider the fact that no matter how much energy efficiency you provide and how much electrification you provide and how many other benefits you provide, there are still folks that are going to have an extremely high energy burden because they have extremely low income. And when we do things like electrification, that can actually increase your electric bill, right? If you had an HVAC that runs on fossil fuel and you switch over to a heat pump, you may see a jump. Or in New Mexico, you'll see folks that we're in the unfortunate situation of we have always used evaporative coolers in New Mexico, and they've always been fine. I have an evaporative cooler. But in the last couple of years with climate change and the extreme weather events that we're experiencing, when it's over 102 for 7-8 days in a row, your evaporative cooler does not help you that much. Those are designed to reduce the heat inside your house by like 15 degrees. Well, I don't want elders who are experiencing health problems to be in a home that's literally 90 degrees. And so we're switching people over from evaporative coolers, which use almost no energy, to hopefully directly to heat pumps rather than going through the step of HVAC units. But with that, we have to think about what the rate should be to provide that service for people. We also have, I think I mentioned there's $500 million is needed to provide services for everyone. And until we get to them, we need to do something about their energy bills immediately. And so just the understanding that we can't help everyone right now with efficiency, but we should do something on the rate front. And then there's the thought that, and I subscribe to this thought, that there's a justification for having a separate rate class for low income people. In New Mexico, and I think region-wide, it is not low income people who are causing grid expansion. Right. There's the costs of better grids, expanding the grids. Those are really costs that are being borne by low income people, but there's no reason for that. And so you can make the justification, I believe, for a separate class of customers. A lot of states already have low income rates. New Mexico does not, and we need legislation that specifically authorizes the Public Regulation Commission to approve low-income rates. Representative Ortez has tried twice now to get that, and we have had to negotiate it out because it's opposed by the utilities for reasons that I will never quite understand. But it's really an important part of this puzzle. And I just wanted to make the point that, like bill payment assistance, like LIHEAP, when you do a low income rate, it's really important that you pair that with maximizing energy efficiency or electrification. You don't want to just reduce the cost and leave people using more energy than they need, because back to that original slide where we want everything to be healthy and safe and operational, we also don't want it to negatively impact the environment, and we don't want it to create problems for future generations. So a package, low income rates are not the single solution.
And I'd like to add here that there is, as part of that negotiation, to drop that part of the language from the bill, we've got some promises from utilities across the state to take a look at low income rates as part of a pilot program. So I'll be meeting with my local co-op next week about what this looks like, and we'll be meeting with folks, I think, throughout the summer to start implementing a pilot program across the state, so we can look at this. It's, again, we're one of the poorest states in the nation, so we could be doing a lot more to reduce that energy burn and reduce that rate.
Hey, Tammy, can I just interrupt for a second? I'm having technical difficulties on my computer on my end on Zoom. If anyone has questions, please put them in the Q&A box on your Zoom control panel.
Thanks, Josh. And that was the end of our presentation. So we have the slide up now. I don't know if you can see, that has both of our contact information. We are happy to chat with you about specifics on any of these. I know this was kind of a high level overview of some of these programs and policies, but just trying to just plant some seeds, but we're always available. Please reach out if you have any questions. And Josh, can you see the questions, or do you need me to try to look?
I can't, because my Zoom crashed, but I can see one. So I'll start.
Okay.
I'll start off with one. Then, if you want to look at the Q&A box, and there's also some in the chat, you can certainly look at those. But we may have a shorter webinar, but and everyone can go to lunch early. So the first question comes from Mesa. Mesa's question is: does the percentage for the energy burden include both natural gas and electricity?
Yes. So the map that we showed of the energy burden statewide, you can pull out just electricity, just gas, but the map that I showed was all energy utility bills combined.
Cool. And well, we have some questions coming in, so this is great. Mesa has another question. What type of outreach was done to Latinx communities?
So for both the C program and the SEED program, we worked a lot of those partners that we talked about in the long list of partners was actually Latinx organizations. And so we relied on those organizations to reach out to their members and their community. Again, because of the trust, right? We want it to come from somebody that they know and they trust, and that they don't feel uncomfortable working with to get qualified for programs. So we did a lot of outreach. I think I said this, but I'll say it again because it bears repeating. This was the largest coalition I've ever worked in. And it was just incredible, the whole entire experience, everyone from immigration groups to the nuns who we sent out to talk to various legislators. It was really an incredible opportunity.
And Rep. Ortez, did you want to follow up? I see that.
Yeah, the Partnership for Community Action, I think that's the name of the group, right, Tammy, that works with, that worked on the C program. That is a group that does, it's a mostly Latino organization run by Latinos with a board that's mostly Latino. So they really focused on immigrant communities in Albuquerque. I think they're a pretty remarkable group. And so I think it was, the outreach was intentional, and very focused on, on really reaching immigrant communities and communities of color.
Cool, thank you. All right, Kelsey has resubmitted her question. Thank you for resubmitting, Kelsey. As I said, if not everyone heard it, I have some technical difficulties. So if you had a question, resubmit it, please. Kelsey's question is, what is your guidance on introducing new technology to building owners in underserved communities?
I can go first, or you want to go first, Reb? Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this was an interesting part of the development of the C program and the C program, because you're going into communities where people don't have a lot of experience with some of these technologies. I mean, quite frankly, anywhere in New Mexico, people don't know what a heat pump is, but you're going into communities where people are working 3 jobs. They don't have a lot of time to learn all about this. And the same goes for the service providers in those areas. And so it's been really a challenge to do the right outreach to make sure that we get service providers that are trained, and then we get program participants that are open to using what to them is new technology.
I mean, I think there's more to do, and this is something that, we'll be, working with our local community partners on as well. I think we have a ways to go, but it's what will happen.
Great, thank you. Stephen asks, as co-ops set their rates as a membership rather than as a rate case via the NMPRC, do you have some best practices to encourage co-ops to include LI programs in their service areas?
Well, I would say, first of all, in New Mexico, that's true. Co-ops can set their own rates, but if they have, I believe the number's 5, but I don't quote me on this, but if 5 or more members file an appeal, it does go through the PRC for final approval. So one of the things that we suggest is getting the local folks to know about options in the rate case, so that if they're not being proposed or are accepted by the utility, the local customers have a really big voice, particularly with co-ops.
Yeah, I think, because, we'll be working with folks over the summer, at least one co-op, hopefully more will start to develop those best practices. But I can imagine that, one thing would be to ensure that there's a strong pipeline from, state and federal funds to those co-ops so they can, tap into those programs to provide those services to low-income folks. So not only are we looking at, reducing the rates, but also getting folks access to the products. I mean, I think that should be one of the best practices, but we're, I think we can learn a lot from the IOUs who've been doing this, and hopefully that will influence the co-ops strategies as well.
Thank you. All right, we had a question in the chat from Don. Don asked, what can be done to encourage the PRC to change the UCT to remove LI programs so utilities can invest more money without affecting the UCT of the utility portfolio?
Do you want me to take that one? That is not up to the PRC. The UTC is in state law. And so the discussion for removing UTC from low income programs most likely will have to go through legislative approval. There is some conversation around having a rulemaking at the PRC that could at least look at things like low income qualification procedures and things like that to really make the low income programs more accessible to folks. And the other thing is that we can push on the PRC to say that the portfolio as a whole has to be cost effective using the UCT, but individual programs do not. And so right now, the way it's being considered at the PRC in general is that each individual program has to be cost effective. And my argument is that low income programs do not have to be cost effective as long as they're in a portfolio of programs, including the industrial, the commercial, the residential, all of those. If all of them together are cost effective, that satisfies the requirements under the Efficient Use of Energy Act for New Mexico.
Great. All right. Acacia, and Acacia, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. How can performance-based program models be improved to better target low-income households and communities?
So we decided to not do performance-based, specifically because the concern was finding a way to make them work for frontline communities. So for example, in that sustainable buildings tax credit that we talked about, an earlier proposal years ago had been to make it a performance-based program, which means that you have to pay for an energy audit, and then you have to do whatever improvements you're going to get or you're going to do, and then you have to do another energy audit to prove that you reduced energy by this amount, and that's fine for someone like me, and then I can claim my tax credit and all as well. But those upfront expenditures of the energy audit for our low income, and given the extreme number of low income people in our state, we decided that the measure by measure approach was more equitable for New Mexico, because we do know through deemed savings and all kinds of studies that things like if you add insulation up to a certain level, you're going to save some energy. We didn't feel that adding that additional barrier and burden, financial burden up front for low income people was the way to go. So that was our thought process for not doing performance-based in our programs and policies.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Francisco, and he's asking a question about Northern Nevada, where SWEEP does a lot of work in Nevada as well. Francisco states that developers are strong opponents to anything that increases housing affordability. Elected officials also share these concerns. How would you address this?
Well, this comes up every single day. And let me just go on my diatribe, and then I'll let the representative give the politically correct answer. But, housing affordability is more than just being able to afford to purchase the home or rent the home. You have to be able to afford to operate the home too. And so the builders here in New Mexico, it's exactly the same. We have the continual argument of you're increasing initial costs. And I'm less concerned about initial costs than I am the operating long-term overall cost of living in a unit, a house, or a multifamily, or whatever it is. So we push back with legislators on that issue and really talk about that's when the energy burden and those kinds of data points are really helpful to help them understand that it's not just having an affordable housing project that you can get into for cheap. It's getting people into long-term housing that they can afford to operate and that they can be comfortable in. Because what we see a lot of times with affordable housing is folks get into these affordable housing units, they can't afford to pay the utilities, so they're sitting there without heat or without cooling, and that is not okay at all. So that's our general pushback, is that we need to look at the entire life cycle cost of home ownership or home rental.
Yeah, and thanks for that. I think that's a huge issue. I live in a community that has high poverty, but also high housing costs. It is, what some might view as a tourist town here in Taos. So we're dealing with a housing crisis in this community. Folks can't afford to live here anymore. People who've lived here for generations. So we have some pilot things happening right now where we're talking about creative ways to increase affordability for housing and build that housing stock. And at the base of all those conversations are, how do we make these homes energy efficient so that folks can afford to stay in those homes, just as Tammy mentioned. And so that it's been very interesting to work at the local level with the town and the county, and and now with me involved at the state level to have those conversations around how to increase affordability, which includes some things like mortgage assistance programs. So because the cost of housing has increased so much, and energy is also expensive, we've really let's use some of our funds right now to really to temper that, bring the costs down by paying $50,000 of the mortgage, or even more. That's something that we're discussing, and I think we're going to go pretty far with it. But I think it should be a little comforting, and I hope it is to Tammy, that energy is a big part of that conversation. So you can maybe afford to buy a $300,000 home, but if it's built at net zero or zero E, your utility costs will be very, very low. We're having those conversations at the local level, regional level.
Thank you. And Fabian is asking, what kind of feedback have either of you received directly from frontline communities when it comes to introducing new technologies?
I can talk about the SEEP project, the program that we did in Albuquerque. We went into those homes and did things like heat pump water heaters. Those were all incredibly new technologies, not just for frontline communities, but for everyone. And the feedback from all the folks that were in that program has been just overwhelmingly positive. We checked in with them just a couple of weeks ago, and they are loving having it. They're talking about it to all their friends. We've gotten a couple of folks from, like 2 blocks away saying, hey, they have this great experience. Can we get in? Which is incredibly gratifying, right? So I haven't had any negative experiences. I think the biggest barrier was just explaining technology in a way that makes sense to folks. And again, having that local community partner that helped us make that explanation and build that trust to allow these strangers to come into your house and give you a heat pump, and you don't truly know, you've never known anybody that had a heat pump, right? So that was a little bit of a barrier, but the local community partners did a great job of bridging that gap, and everyone's been super happy with the outcome.
And Fabian, I think we have a lot to learn as we roll out the rules and the grant program for SEED on the state level, and that will inform what's next, and if we need to make any tweaks to the legislation, or how, or of course increasing the funding is what we really want, but that will help us determine how successful this program is. We know a lot from some places, but we don't know a lot from statewide. So this is we're looking forward to it.
Great, thank you. Why don't we take this one from Chad? Chad says, super helpful information. Are they already, or has any thought been given to having smart thermostats as an eligible measure for weatherization programs? Most programs can get Energy Star certified models for less than $100, and the savings plus demand response functionality seem well worth the investment.
Yeah, smart thermostats are a program measure in our state weatherization program and our IOU energy efficiency programs. They would be, of course, eligible under C and SEED. So yes, I think that's a given. I'm not aware of any programs in New Mexico that don't include smart thermostats.
Great. All right, why don't we end on this one? Robert submitted this early. New Mexico is a demand electric state, meaning every drop of electricity produced every day is being used. This is why we have rolling blackouts sometimes. His question is, what is the state planning for electrical supply increase that will be needed to handle additional demand created by pushing people to all electric systems?
Go ahead and start, Tammy.
All right. Well, so I would first say that we have not experienced rolling blackouts or brownouts. There has been some concern that we could, but we have not. So first of all, that's just a clarification. There's a lot of conversation happening. We're closing down coal-fired power plants. We've got, massive renewable energy, utility scale renewable energy programs, and big community solar programs, and a lot of distributed energy coming online. That really is being addressed through the integrated resource plans for each of the utilities. And there are tons of advocates that are on that. The utilities, the last thing the utilities want is to not be able to provide power. So there are many people focused on that issue. I do participate in the integrated resource planning process, but I'm certainly not the expert on IRPs. So I would say I could get you in touch with somebody who is an expert on IRPs. But from my point of view, I know the right people are working on that. And again, we are not experiencing those things right now.
Yeah. And I'll add that, I'm also not the expert on that at all, but I will say that, I think to prevent, what happened in December, which was, not a rolling blackout, but just, a loss of electricity due to, trees, felled trees, like tens of thousands of trees fell on lines all around northern New Mexico. We have to build resiliency. We need to be looking at investing in things like microgrids and, community solar systems, and making those really truly affordable for our rural communities. I think it's a really good question. And I think that we can do more to increase reliability and resiliency across the state. But we've got IOUs and co-ops and folks, working to provide electricity all around the state. And we're not all playing by the same rule book, I think.
I would also add, so we just passed two years ago,
2020 grid
modernization state legislation that has brought together a working group that focuses on that particular issue. So I'd be happy to get you more information on that too.
And Josh, I'd like to add here, there have been some really remarkable comments in the chat, which include lots of very helpful links to to get more information. Thanks to everybody who put those in. If we could share those, I don't want to click off this and lose all of that really that helpful information, energy equity maps and things like that.
Yes,
we can make sure that folks get access to that. Great.
Yes,
thanks.
Absolutely. And I'm sorry, I'm blacked out here. My camera got a little screwy when my Zoom crashed. I will be putting those links in the follow-up email with the recording of the webinar uploaded to our YouTube channel. And is there anything else you'd like to add, Rep. Ortez and Tammy?
Well, my information was on the last slide. Please include that, Josh. We didn't get to all the questions. There's some really great questions. Tammy and I are really happy to answer those questions. So just give me a call, give Tammy a call, email us, and we can answer those questions for you. But thank you so much for being here.
And I want to thank everybody. It was really kind of gratifying to see so many folks interested in this topic. It's really a topic that Representative Ortez and I truly care about and work on every single day. And I'm just really excited to see that there are this many folks that are interested in the topic as well. So thank you for being here and giving us the opportunity to share some of our New Mexico experience.
Yes, thank you both. And we really had a great attendance today. And this is surely not the last webinar we're going to be doing on energy equity, and SWEEP operates around the Southwest. And thank you so much for these examples from New Mexico. And I know you're dealing with challenges, but you're making great headway with energy efficiency and energy equity and renewables and climate change mitigation. So thanks, everybody. Like Rep. Ortez said, feel free to contact her or Tammy Fiebelkorn, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.